Saudi Arabia has been a country that has been mentioned a lot in the past 18 months. Criticized in many cases, being a participant in talks, being a country that the agreement revolves around. Back in April 2024, Joe Biden declared that he had an offer to Benjamin Netanyahu, which included at the time having a Palestinian state and also having an agreement with Saudi Arabia. This was described a deal on a golden plate coming from Joe Biden. Benjamin Netanyahu outright rejected it, saying that we will never have a Palestinian state. We're not willing to have a Palestinian state, not for a deal and not for no deal. A Palestinian state will not happen here between the Jordan River to the sea, not by the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank, neither by the PA nor by Hamas in Gaza, because according to him, that would be a reward for what they did on October the 7th, according to the logic of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, initially, the tone that came from Saudi Arabia and media affiliated with Saudi Arabia was criticized very heavily because of its position in relation to Gaza. However, during that time, several changes started to happen. And these changes came in the form of closer ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Of course, they already had a deal being brokered by China before the 7th of October in 2023 to de-escalate tensions between them and to have better relations after years of hostilities. Then there was a military coordination between them. The defense minister of Saudi Arabia visited Iran and he met with the supreme leader. He spoke about the Zionist entity and the fact that the Muslim world needs to unite against the Zionist entity and the occupation of Palestine. They denied that they will have any sort of peace treaty with Israel or get into what is labeled as the Abraham Accords. If Israel has a ceasefire with Gaza, they said their condition remained as it was, that the Palestinians need to have a state and there needs to be a solution to the Palestinian cause before we have any deal with Israel. Now, some of the reports that came out that spoke about Saudi Arabia having a deal with Israel or a peace treaty with Israel just if a ceasefire happens, these things usually pop up as test balloons to check the response. Now, Saudi Arabia outright denied. But now, the Saudi representative participated in the ICJ hearing against Israel. As a matter of fact, there were very fierce statements coming from Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and South Africa at the ICJ against Israel. And one of the things that grabbed my attention is the terminology that is being used by the Saudis in relation to Israel. So, of course, there were multiple reports about the Saudi representative at the ICJ hearing. It was, of course, long, about 25 minutes, so I'm not going to share the whole video, but I just wanted to quote a few things that were mentioned, especially in relation to the terminology. The man who was there, Ambassador Ziad Al-Atiyah, used very, very strong statements against Israel and language. Some people described as even explicit, like barbaric. He said, describing Israel's military actions in Gaza, particularly against civilians, he said that's barbarity. He also referred to the occupation and settlement expansion in Palestinian territories, calling them legally indefensible. He said Israel turned Gaza into a pile of rubble. Systematic violations of international law. Again, Israel consistently breaching global law and legal norms. He also criticized how Palestinians are being treated by Israel, and he stated the dehumanization of Palestinians. He outright said that what Israel is conducting in Gaza amounts to ethnic cleansing, mass extermination, as in it's a genocide, saying what Israel is doing is a genocide in Gaza. He equated Israel's policies with racial segregation and oppression, calling Israel an apartheid regime, without really declaring where that apartheid regime lies, West Bank, Gaza, or between the Jordan River to the sea. He also said that Israel, by cutting off food, water, and electricity on civilians, that's a denial of basic survival needs. What Israel is doing in Gaza are crimes against humanity, and they don't have any justification in what he labeled as an unjustified self-defense, debunking the claims of Israel. Now, the reason that this is very significant is because, well, we are hearing things that are very far from that. We're hearing constantly that, well, yeah, the peace is just around the corner. Benjamin Netanyahu was lobbying Saudi Arabia. It's Israel following Saudi Arabia, by the way, to get a deal. The people need to understand that Israel constantly chases after Arab states to get recognition. And there are many reasons for that. Why? Because they are thieves, and a thief needs to get legitimacy. So they constantly beg for recognition. It doesn't matter how they portray it. Like, Benjamin Netanyahu can be as arrogant as he likes, and he can have his theatrics as much as he wants. But the truth is, it's Israel chasing these agreements, begging the United States to lobby. Now, Saudi Arabia, despite the fact that the UAE and Bahrain went into the Abraham Accords before, that was a very big opportunity for Saudi Arabia, and they could have used that as an excuse to go into the Abraham Accords immediately, saying that, fine, everyone is normalizing, we'll normalize too. But they didn't. And 7th of October hasn't happened yet beforehand. As a matter of fact, this happened back in 2018-19. We had, at the time, 4 years of quiet between Israel and Gaza following the 2014 war between Israel and Gaza, before the 2021 escalation, and of course before the 7th of October, meaning that, well, Saudi Arabia is actually in no rush to have a deal with Israel, and that the statements coming by officials in Saudi Arabia that say that, no, we won't have a deal with them just if we have a ceasefire, they clearly have some sort of standing. Therefore, Saudi Arabia, not only that it's not going to go into a deal with Israel unless there is a deal based on the things that are happening now and the statements that we're seeing, they're not going to go into that unless there is a solution with Palestine in general. But no, actually, the statements that are coming from Saudi Arabia are becoming harsher. Again, genocide, barbarity, apartheid regime, all of these statements against Israel, added by the ties that they're having with Iran, more hostile statements previously coming against Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, after Netanyahu suggested that the Palestinians can take, some land from Saudi Arabia. And now these statements today show that, no, actually, hold on a second. These people are participating in the hearing against Israel at the ICJ, blaming Israel of a genocide in Gaza. South Africa calling, hey, what are you doing? ICJ, you need to take action. The genocide's still happening. And Saudi Arabia going and participating when they could have avoided it. So these things are important. This is a very important development. Now, moving on to the next thing that I wanted to share with you. Many airlines stopped flying to Israel after October the 7th and after the Israeli genocide in Gaza began. Now, with the airlines, usually they buy slots. They buy slots in every airport they want to go in. So they will have their designated slots. And sometimes they need to wait for a very long time to get these slots. There's something happening with some of the airlines and major airlines, British and Turkish too. They're saying, we're actually, you know what? We don't want these timelines. We don't want these slots, and we're not going to go back to Israel. So there was this report in Israel today saying that some of these airlines are completely canceling anything to do with Israel. They're not going to go there anymore, and they're not projected to go there anytime soon. And Israel is saying at least up until the end of 2025. But based on these moves and them giving up their slots in the Israeli airports, they're signaling that actually we were not going to go back there at all. Number one, Turkish Airlines. Of course, Turkey cut all ties with Israel. They stopped flying to Israel since the beginning. Tensions have been very high between them and Israel. Pegasus and Virgin Atlantic from Britain too, saying that we're not going to fly anymore to the Ben Gurion airport, even if there's a ceasefire. So we're talking about, developments and potentially having a deal, a slight de-escalation. Some of them are done. This is something that hurts Israel very badly. Why? Because you're talking about major airlines that bring a lot of tourism to Israel, and that doesn't send good signals for anyone abroad towards Israel. If major airlines stop flying there, that means this place is unattractive for tourism. This place is unattractive for investment. The fact that this is coming after Moody's, one of the biggest credit rating companies in the world, rating companies in the world in terms of finances and economy, downgraded Israel twice. Israel is now only one level above investment worthy, according to Moody's, with a negative projection for the future. It makes Israel a very, very bad place. Not attractive for tourists, not attractive for investments, not attractive for anyone to go to visit. And these airlines, with this move, they're also not being very hopeful for the future. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about, more countries are having official ties with Israel, with Palestine, with the Palestinian Authority, recognizing a Palestinian state, developments coming from European countries, recognizing Palestinian statehood, having ties, opening ties, having more aid, giving more aid to the Palestinians. Now, we'll begin with Norway. Norway, this was reported on TRT Global, formally opens diplomatic ties with the state of Palestine. The Palestinian ambassador presents credentials to Norwegian King Harald in Oslo amid mounting war crimes accusations against Israel. Norway and the Norwegian king as well. Israel criticized them, and many people in Israel criticized them heavily for their position in relation to Palestine. And now they're taking this to another level. But of course, it wasn't just Norway now. There are changes as well coming from countries globally, France, for example. But funny enough, Britain now is slowly moving towards that direction. Now, the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he hosted the Palestinian leader as the government unveils 101 million in support, 101 million British pounds in support. Foreign Secretary and Mohamed Mustafa signed a memorandum of understanding outlining their commitment to advocating Palestinian statehood. Palestinian statehood. This is a development coming from Britain. Now, of course, Britain officially calls for a Palestinian state, a two-state solution. And now they're saying, okay, we're going to have more aid in. The British Prime Minister was talking about, the suffering in Gaza and the bad situation in Gaza. And, it's some of the typical talk that comes from the, British leadership. But there's something very important here, especially in relation to Britain. Now, Britain talking about, and when we say Britain as in the British establishment, of course, there's a gap between the British people and the British establishment. But when the British establishment talks about Palestine, it's a bit of a different story than other countries talking about Palestine. And the reason is, well, Britain was the country that started this problem, didn't they? There was the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Then, of course, there was what was labeled at the time the British Mandate. in Palestine following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And at the end of the day, it was under the British rule that Israel established itself as a state. Most of the funding that came for the state of Israel came from Britain or people in Britain. And Britain has a much greater responsibility towards Palestine than simply recognizing a Palestinian state or sending 101 million in aid. This is not enough, and this is not addressing the key issues here. Of course, any progress is welcome, anything positive, good, great. However, there are key issues. Number one, Britain as an establishment must acknowledge the historical mistakes in Palestine, from the Balfour Declaration up to allowing the Zionist gangs who used to kill British troops in Palestine and whom Britain at the time used to proscribe as terrorist organization when they stole the land of Palestine, all of that era. They need to immediately stop all arms to Israel unconditionally, and don't just tell me 10% and 20% and 90%. Everything, all security and intelligence support to Israel. We've seen many revelations about over 200 reconnaissance missions over Gaza, British intel support for Israel. The British Prime Minister himself, Keir Starmer, he was legitimizing the starvation of Gaza back in 2023. We shouldn't be forgetting all of these things. And finally, what Britain must do as an establishment and as a state is the thing that is most necessary now. Britain, if Britain is genuine, and we're talking about the British establishment here, if it is indeed genuine about having a solution for the Palestinian people and for the Israeli people too, call for the one and only solution. A one democratic state with equal rights between the Palestinians and the Israelis throughout all of the Palestinian territories, between the Jordan River to the sea, where everyone, regardless of their faith or race, can live in equality and peace and be granted equal rights. If Britain is genuine about a solution, if any other country is genuine about a solution, this is the solution that they need to be talking about. No more talking about a two-state solution. This illusion of a two-state solution isn't really possible at all now. Israel annexed most of the West Bank. The situation on the ground makes it almost impossible. And everyone views Palestine as the historical Palestine. Therefore, you call for the solution that works for everyone, simultaneously, whilst taking action to stop the genocide machine and the supremacist Zionist regime that has been committing these crimes since 1948.